My name is Dwayne Stovall. I'm director of Get Off My State. It is as my wife refers to it lovingly, a non-profit for-profit. We're not a non-profit status because I don't want to tell the IRS anything ever.
Amen.
So we just made the decision we weren't going to engage with them, and the people that advertise with Get Off My State, which is an opportunity for people to help perpetuate the message that we bring, is it's a blessing on many, many different levels. There's a lot of trust involved, but the fact is, Get Off My State was born out of a campaign for U.S. Senate. Some of you know I ran for U.S. Senate against John Cornyn. As a layman, as just a dad, small business owner, member of school board, with about $70,000, we garnered about 11% of the state of Texas. I didn't think that was much then. The day after the primary, I realized that was pretty much an anomaly. To pull almost 11% of this state on just that few dollars was pretty impressive. Now I'm pretty happy about it. Then I wasn't so happy about it. But I'm proud of it. I would say that. I'm proud of it. Get Off My State is the culmination of what I learned during a year and a half or two of campaigning and figuring out that most people generally don't understand the Constitution or the construct of it. We think we do, but we generally don't. Today, I'm going to try and get you to kind of rethink how you view your congressman and what their behavior should be like, and maybe give you a new kickstart on what direction you want to go with the new insight you have as to the authority that's in front of you. I start with a generalized, we're going to back this way up to kind of Constitution 101 for just a second, just to refresh everybody's memory. Do you live in the free and independent state of Texas?
Yes.
Really?
Well, no.
Oh, we're going to start off on the right foot right away.
Texas.
All right, I'm going to rephrase this in a new way, okay? I want you to think about what I'm about to ask you and see if you've ever heard it this way before, and I want you to see if you disagree. If you don't live in the United States of America, in the free and independent state of Texas, I'm going to ask you, do you live in the United States, singular, of America, in the county of Texas? Would that be more apropos? Right? There's not a state in this union that manages its own affairs. None. Zero. There are varying levels of servitude to a federal government. The state of Texas, who we like to run around and say we're open for business and we're just, we're the active economy and we create most of the jobs. That's wonderful, except for the fact that we are second in debt among all of them. In the last in the last decade in Texas, our population has grown by somewhere around 10 to 12%, while our debt has increased over 175%. So when you hear a state representative tell you, well, we've got to spend more money because we've got, our people are moving in, our population's growing. Well, there's no intrinsic connection between the amount of people moving in and how much money we spend. They spend too much. That's what it comes down to. That Constitution, and this is where I talk to a lot of students. So if you feel like I'm talking down to you, you already know all this stuff. Don't worry about it. Most of you probably know as much as I do about this. These are very simple principles. Some of you will think this is brand new. And you're the ones I'm really reaching out to. And we'll get deeper into some things that most of us don't address later. But right now I want to refresh it. That Constitution is based on three principles. If you know these three principles, you know every single aspect of our government and how to deal with it. That is limited government, republicanism, and federalism. Limited government, you can interchange the term limited government with the term liberty. The phrase limited government with the term liberty. Basically, the smaller a government is, the more free the people are. And the larger a government is, the adverse, or inverse, the less free they are. There's never been a society in history where the government got so large that people are so much more free. It doesn't work that way. Got it? So, that's limited government. Very easy concept. Republicanism, very important concept. Nathan got into some of that earlier. Anybody's read let me back this up. Republicanism is the concept you're going to be represented by those you elect. Very simple. Too many of us were going to elect somebody to help make the decision-making process, right? Okay, well, in the framing of the Constitution in Philadelphia, they labored over what that formula was going to be. Anybody seen it in the Constitution? Originally, it was 30,000 citizens to the representative. It's still in the Constitution. Why was that? Because they labored over it. And some wanted 50,000, some said 10,000. They ended up with the number 30. The reason was that in a community of about 30,000 people, there's a pretty high likelihood you would know the person you were voting for. And at the very least, you would know someone that knew the person you were voting for, and you would have what we do not have today, and that is context of character. Today, nobody knows who their representatives are. Nobody. We are less than the 1%ers in this room. We're a fractional, nominal number of people who know who our representatives are. What happened in the early 20th century, when the sitting Congress, by the way, Texas knows a lot about redistricting, right? Okay, that's not new. That's not new. Okay, in the early 20th century, they were having some issues with the fact that there's only two ways to grow the Congress, the number of representatives, and that's through census or incoming states with changes in population, right? Well, there was going to be a large change in population going about 1910 going forward, which, by the way, a lot of what we'll talk about today has a lot to do with a particular era, very progressive era. Okay. Well, sitting congressmen at that time were worried. They were worried that they might lose their position, find a challenger, be districted into an area where they wouldn't get reelected. You know, there was 435 of them. That's a lot of people. That's plenty. So they got together, they changed the rules, and they said, that's plenty of us, we don't need any more. And they solidified it around 1926 or 7 with a Representation Act. That said, what happened in that moment in history, whether you want to take in that little period of a few years, 1913, 17th Amendment, banking regs, all the creation of all this really evil period, in the middle of all that, they locked themselves in at 435. Why is that such a big deal? Because free societies, and the free republics specifically, are all based on scale. When you get out of scale, everything goes off the rails. You're done. I mean, freedom is not protected when you're out of scale. So what happens? You have a body of 435 people. You have a fixed population of X. Over the course of the last 100 years, the population has grown exponentially, correct?
Yes.
So now we have over 320 million of us. That number has not changed. So what happens in that dynamic? Power goes to that few people. So where I used to represent 30,000, well, now I represent 750,000. You don't know who I am, but I get to control lots of stuff that you do. So all the power gets centralized, which is the polar opposite of anything that has to do with being free people, right? A republic, divesting authority, limited government, all those aspects, gone. They don't exist. And by the way, if I sound a little fatalistic, I'm sorry, but there's a certain truth to power you have to address. The light comes on and it never goes off. That is, we don't live in a free society. Okay? We are very much controlled. Every aspect of our daily lives is controlled. There's nothing you eat, wear, sit on, drive, look at, touch, that's not managed, regulated in some way, shape, or form by this national government. Now, keep that in mind as we go forward, because there's a happy ending. Maybe. The third principle is federalism. Federalism is the most important. I leave it for last because it is the most important. That is the concept that the states will maintain all expansive authority, save those few enumerated, delegated authorities listed in the federal Constitution. The states will maintain all the rest of it.
It's a great picture.
Well, she represents the states. The dog represents the federal government, looking to her for advice, for a command, to be led. That is federalism. This is not federalism. This is what we live with today. Pretend like you're going to amend your own constitution to represent the traditions and morals and values of the people of your state. Not going to happen. There are an elite group of people who are simply smarter than we are. They're smarter than we are because we are too stupid to manage our own lives. I'm not calling you stupid. I'm just saying we're too stupid to manage our own lives because it's a fact. We don't do it. We look to them for guidance. If we don't like what we see, we go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court talks. It's like your grandfather when you're 5 and you just go home and go, man, that's how it's supposed to be. That federal system was described by James Madison in Federalist 45. And everybody brings up the Federalist Papers. Now, I want you to know I don't harp on the Federalist Papers because I've read enough and had enough experience going through source documents to be able to honestly say the Federalist Papers didn't really make a lot of impact on anything that went on during the ratification period. They didn't get a lot of circulation. They had some good points in them, but lots of people rely on them. They didn't get to some of the states until after they had voted. It didn't have the kind of impact we think. But what's important about this is James Madison described federalism. Now, keep in mind, James Madison was in Philadelphia. Most of what he put forward, they voted down. He was a nationalist. He wanted a very large central government. He got voted down. But what came out of Philadelphia, what they finally agreed to, what only 30-some odd of them actually signed off on, and the rest wouldn't, was this limited government. So James Madison, who absolutely was honest, he came out, he went, and he sold it for exactly what they agreed to it. Not like Hamilton, who sold it as one thing knowing he was going to screw us over with something else. Different story. But this is the most eloquent description of federalism. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Few and defined. Simple statement. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Simple, right? Now, how much authority is few and defined in the federal government today? Doesn't exist. There's no limitations on that government. They can do anything they want any day of the week, and there's nothing we can do about it, supposedly. I always get into this with people, especially if I'm talking to YAL or maybe not necessarily a Republican conservative group. They'll say, oh, you're talking about the federal government being able to, or the states having states' rights and states being able to pass laws that would infringe on my freedom. And I tell them, well, in short, yes, they can do that. Should be able to do that. Oh, no state has the right to. I said, I'm not getting philosophical with you. I think gun rights are a God-given right, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you believe your rights come from humanity just because you exist. I don't care. We can all agree to all these things. Natural rights are natural rights, period. But what we're getting into is constitutional construct. If a state wanted to write laws that oppressed the people that lived in that state, they could. Why did they choose a federal system? Because if a state chose to write laws that would oppress its people, what would they do? They'd go to another state. They didn't use the term free market, and I get a kick out of the term free market these days anyway, because usually, and I can say this because I've shaved my head, so I don't really know if I'm going gray or not. Generally gray-haired, older politicians use the term free market because they think they're getting a thumbs up from the young generation, and it connects them with somebody. But they don't have any context of free market most of the time. I know a few. One is speaking over at Bryan College Station today at YL. Ron Paul. I know he understands that. The majority don't understand that. They think it's free market as long as they've got a chance to regulate it the way it is. But this is true. The federal system, a state, it created a free market for liberty. A state would be able to do whatever it chose to do according to the people that lived there, and if they wanted to abuse each other, people would leave, and they would go to the more free location. We don't have that today. We have everything on high. What the Constitution created was a federal government with limited power. What we have today is a national government. It is not a federal government. It is a national, singular government, okay, with unlimited power. Make no mistake about it. Don't fool yourselves. There is no limitation to it. We can all sit around here and say Governor Abbott's doing this and he's pushing the states' rights button. Nothing. And I like him. But and we'll get into this a little longer, he's a very learned attorney. Nothing against attorneys or the legal profession. It takes good attorneys to fight bad attorneys. But the fact is, if you're a learned case methodology attorney, you think you have one weapon. and you're going to sue. Well, where do people go to lose? Where do states go to lose?
Supreme Court.
Hey, you guys get extra bonus points. Nationalism. When all power is held by the central government, with the states being utilized as subordinate administrators. I wrote that. Just like that. That's what we live with. The states are subordinate. There is no way around it. They take their marching orders from the federal government. How do they do that? We all know it's basically through money. Okay? It's kind of like the idea that they're going to take the fruits of your labor out of your paycheck before you ever get your paycheck. Isn't that interesting how that happens? We don't write a check to the government. They take it before we ever see it. Then they turn around, they dangle it back to the states, and they say, here, well, we'll give you back a little bit, but wait a minute, this is the water pressure you're going to have at your shower head. Oh, wait a minute, what's that? You want to pray in a public building? Oh, wait a minute, you want to put God or Scripture? Wait a minute, we're going to call that art, not pornography. You know, it's all these things are tied to this relationship. I call it the soprano relationship. They own us through extortion. And the fact is, we're so deeply entrenched in this extortion that no one has the gall, and I'm going to say that, the gall to go, maybe we should say no. Why? Anybody know anything about Texas budgetary means? I'm talking in big, gross numbers. Because Texas cracks me up. James White left, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. This is the third time in a year that I've been somewhere where James was, and he leaves before I talk. You take a guy like James or any other state representative, right? Plop them up in front of you, let them talk to you about the budget, and you're going to get this long circular reasoning about how we're doing this, and we're cutting that, we're doing this. When they're done, if you have a chance to go through the CAFR, okay, which is your yearly report on your financial status in Texas, if you'll use gross numbers on them, you really mess them up hard. If you go back, not the last biennial, but the one before, I think it was 82nd, listen to what I'm going to tell you. In the state of Texas, we paid in taxes, us, in the state, about $80 billion. What do you think they spent? About $190+ billion. And people who've been through third grade math go, well, that doesn't ring. How does that? What? That's that Common Core math working, right? They can't do it. We're broke. We're absolutely broke as a state. That is all subsidized in some way, shape, or form through federal government. They don't have the money to afford their own budget. We spend on average about 40% more than we take in taxes in the state of Texas. Like that or not, that's the truth. The federal government spends on average about 33% more than they take in taxes. So how is it they don't have enough money to pay their budget, yet they're subsidizing 40% of our budget? What's the Fed? They print money. They digitize it. Oh, we're just going to stick it out there, and here it is. So not only are they stealing from us to dangle it back in front of us, they're borrowing money in our name and dangling it back to us too. You couldn't write more evil that's going on without us paying attention to it if you wanted to. This is the most evil alignment, other than people just hanging people from the trees and shooting people in public. We're all being strangled by servitude, and we're giving our sanction to it every single day. It's awful, but I'm smiling. Now, I'm going to jump through a whole bunch of stuff here because we don't have enough time. This thing that I'm doing for you today is a very cut down version. I can do this for 2 hours and get onto one subject matter, and it's to me it's very interesting. I've narrowed it down to something very simple, and it's something I want everybody to walk away from here with. How did this happen? Why did it happen? We could all sit around here all day long and talk about who blames who blames the presidents, who blames the Congress, Can somebody describe what type of government we're supposed to have? What does the school teach you? What is it about our government that's just simple policy? Everybody learns it in school. Representative. We have three branches. They are
judiciary, the legislature.
and they are all what?
Co-equal.
Okay. Most of that is quasi-true. Co-equal is the biggest lie you ever learned in school. They're not co-equal. Never were designed to be co-equal. There's a reason why one body has more than all the rest of it in membership. There's a reason why the House in Congress has the majority of the membership. That's the reason why they can impeach anybody in government. There's a reason why they are the ones that control the purse strings. It's the reason why they originate any spending. It's the reason why they are the ones that can declare war. Nobody in the judiciary can do that. Nobody in the executive can do that. And nobody in the Senate can even do that without the House originating. So that House has all the power in our government at their fingertips to control it. Not necessarily to rule in case law, not necessarily to direct the military in action, but they have the power to rein in all the rest of it. Okay? They have that, no matter what our congressmen say to the contrary. But, for the answer to the question how, why, and all that, Thomas Jefferson nailed it. Interesting. Thomas Jefferson was not in Philadelphia. Thomas Jefferson was not a member of the first Congress. This is his review sometime after they enacted the Constitution. He says the Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape in any form they please. That man was way ahead of his time. Not perfect, but I happen to have Jeffersonian principles. I take him even with his warts and all. But the fact of the matter is, these people are generally to blame for that they carry the vast majority of the responsibility for why we are in the position we are in today. Now, there's more over on this, but I'm centralizing on them to get you to where we're going to go. These folks, generally in the 20th century, 21st century, 20th century, they have used the Bill of Rights as their predominant weapon. We could sit here and argue all day long over whether or not you think the Bill of Rights was supposed to apply to the states. It was not. We can get into a discussion over Reconstruction debates all you want. We can talk about everything that anybody said. All the arguments are going to go back to the fact that 135 years of Supreme Court justices decided that this was a restriction on the federal government only. By the way, if anybody starts talking about the Federal Bill of Rights applies to the states, ask them if they have a Bill of Rights in their state constitution. Do we? Does it mean anything? We are relegated right now. Remember, we're too stupid to run our lives. We are relegated right now to 320 million people across 50 different states who are supposed to live by one supposedly limited constitution and one Bill of Rights that was originally written to limit the federal government. So the fact that we have 50 different states who have 50 different constitutions and 50 different bills of rights, those are meaningless. Think about that. They exist for a reason. But we allow ourselves to get caught up into this idea that has been planted in our brains for generations, since before we were old enough to speak, that federal government is on high, that we give our undying loyalty to this federal government, and that the Supreme Court is, by God, supreme over everything, which is a complete distortion of Article 6 in the Constitution, by the way. Anybody that says, well, it's the supreme law of the land, they need to crack the Constitution open and read it. When you get into things like place the name of God or in a public building, make it a crime to burn a Texas U.S. flag, recognize marriage between one man and one woman, decide pornography is not art, criminalize abortion as a choice of birth control, decide not to pay for the education of illegal aliens, require persons to show proof of citizenship, or manage the bearing of arms as they see fit. These are all states' rights. What I'm saying is, if you're in Connecticut, and the people of Connecticut elect their representatives to go to their state capital and write laws for them that so much as recognize Adam marrying Steve, that is their right. If the state of Oklahoma has an overwhelming majority of 3.9 million people come together and say, we're going to offer an amendment to our state constitution that reflects our moral values and principles in the state of Oklahoma, and they offer it legitimately and correctly, add it to their constitution, where in the hell does a single federal judge have the authority to decide that what they want doesn't count? They don't. but we live with it because we're trained from here to here to agree with it. We're trying to undo these training, these programming. Now, can it be stopped? This whole nationalization. Folks, nationalization is the most awful thing you could possibly do to a country. The idea that we are not divesting, we all argue from the point that we're going to have states' rights. We all argue from the point we got the 10th Amendment. Yeah, all those things exist, and they're just fodder. They're just something for us to talk about. Because the fact is, every single day, we nationalize more and more and more. And I can get in front of a group of 200 or 20 people, doesn't matter, and I can get a whole bunch of them who will speak in terms of Jefferson. They'll quote him, they'll read the Constitution, they'll have it in their pocket, they'll say they're constitutionalists, and if you tell them that they're doing something in California that they don't like, they'll stomp the floor and be viscerally upset. Okay? And then you go, well, hold on a second. If you support the constitutional construct, what the people in California do is their business. Remember, supremacy. Article 6, the word we were shooting for earlier is pursuant. If it involves the Constitution is what? Those limited authorities, correct? Limitations. If it involves those limited limitations and the laws that are written pursuant to those limitations, those are definitely supreme. And the states all agree to that. But outside of that little box, the federal government's got no business in anything.
Amen.
So I'm not necessarily one of those who thinks we need to go through a big process with state governors and legislators to address the federal government. I'm a non-participation guy. When I go to Austin during session, I have state legislators look at me like, you can't be serious. Because I'll tell them flat out, if you don't like what the federal government's doing to you, write legislation that contradicts it. And at the end of that legislation, tell them that we don't accept their view of their authority. It doesn't exist. And because of that, anyone caught giving aid, information, returning phone calls, messages, mail to the federal government in the way of litigation around this legislation is going to go to jail. Because when we say we're not going to participate, we're not participating. So send us all the letters, schedule all the hearings you want at your little downtown Houston Federal building. Nobody's going to be there. We're not participating. We're not wasting one dime of our fellow Texans' money on litigating anything that has nothing to do with your business. It's none of your business. I've had guys who get up and give a big spiel and they talk about getting outside the box. We got to think outside the box. We're going to have to take a stand. How far outside the box you want to get? Right? Now, I would show a picture of the Boehners and Paul Ryans and all of that, but they're not the ones. I'm doing this because when you leave this room today, you'll know so much more about the office of Congress than your own congressman does. It's not even funny. But it will change the way I'm hoping to change the way you view that position and change the way you address them. Change the way you put pressure on them when you get the opportunity to. Change the way your dialogue is when you have discourse with people about your congressman. Article 3 in the federal Constitution. Everybody knows Article 1 covers who? Legislative branch. Article 2 covers the executive branch. Article 3 covers the judicial branch, right? Now, interesting thing that most people don't realize, because this is the one nobody pays attention to. Everybody wants to know what's the president doing that's wrong. You know, I don't see the list in Article 1 what this Congress is not supposed to do that, but everybody forgets about this. You know who this was written for? And it wasn't the Supreme Court. Article 3 is written for the Congress. Wholly. It has two statements of fact, of shall, that involve the Supreme Court. One you addressed earlier. There shall be a Supreme Court. That's one of them. Knock that one out of the way. I'm going to show you the others. Now this is straight out of the Constitution. I'm not creating new philosophy here. This is factual. I just want you to see it through the way I saw it, the way this epiphany happened to me a few years ago. Article Article 3 is the judicial branch. Section 1, judicial powers. Judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. Simple enough, right? Got to be a Supreme Court. There's going to be one. You're not going to get rid of it. And in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The Supreme Court doesn't decide we're going to have 5 different levels of courts, or what the setup of the appellate jurisdiction is going to be. That's Congress. So whether they exist or whether they don't exist is fully within the power of Congress. Understand that? The judicial branch has the Supreme Court. Everything below those judges falls under our Congress. Section 2, trial by jury or original jurisdiction, jury trials. Judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity. Now, if I am a hard right-winger, right, or if I'm a far left-winger, if I want to yell at you and say the supremacy clause, I stop reading, judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity. You lose. Problem is, they don't read enough. Arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States and treaties made, or which shall be made under their authority. That sounds like a really big blanket. This is even longer, and it's specific now. I want you to understand the specificity that's going on here. To all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies in which the United States shall be a party. That's going to be an example for us in just a second. To controversies between 2 or more states, between a state and the citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between the state or the citizens thereof and foreign state citizens or subjects. It's not a broad platitude here. But you know what? That's really broad compared to what it actually says. It says in all cases, this is section 2, in all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall be a party. 3 types of cases listed right there. It says the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. They own those. 3. Got it? 3 types of cases. Amazing. In all other cases before mentioned. Excuse me.
I think we're actually running out of time. So you know.
Are we?
Yeah. Hang on a second.
Can we do it?
What I was going to say was, all that list before mentioned, in all cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction both as to law and to fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. So, what happens? You get a congressman that understands this concept. He goes to the floor and he says, hey, you know what? There's really no way in the Constitution we can justify that we have the authority over pick your issue. And so, you know, like abortion, where people are so split on that issue, and states need to be able to manage that according to the will of their people. Okay, how about we write a legislation that says something to the effect of, as of today, the issue of abortion will be remanded to the states, and the federal judiciary will no longer have standing on the issue of abortion. 1 line. Of course, they can't, you know, it takes 10,000 pages to write a resolution on how to get to the bathroom at the Capitol. So, 1 line legislation. They control the judiciary that way. The problem is, vast majority of the congressmen I've been in front of don't have a clue that they have that authority. 0. They don't get it. Most of them walk around thinking that the Supreme Court ruled, therefore, oh crap, our hands are tied. Our hands are tied. No, you control them. By the way, the issue in which a state shall be a party, the reason this is so important, anybody ever read the 11th Amendment? There would be no 11th Amendment if the Supreme Court, just 4 years after they implemented the Constitution, had decided to get involved in a lawsuit called Chisholm v. Georgia, in which an individual from South Carolina was suing the state of Georgia over an estate, and the Supreme Court got involved, and the sitting Congress at that time, who already knows all of this correctly, goes, hey man, that's none of your business, and they wrote the 11th Amendment and restricted their involvement in the cases in which the state is a party. So this is absolutely the way it's supposed to work. I can cut it off right there. I'm just telling y'all, that Article 3 is very, very important. Yes, we need state legislators who are willing to put their money where their mouth is and draw lines in the sand and say we're not participating. It's going to be very tough on the moneyed interests. I like what he's saying about going and trying to find those particular issues that aren't necessarily tied to funding. Great spots to start. But anytime you look at your congressman and you hear them speak now, every time you hear that weak lift, weak need, well, not a lot we can do about it. Well, we're waiting on the Supreme Court. No, you're not. No, you're absolutely not. And if you want to represent the moral values and traditions of the people of Texas, then you're going to allow the people of Texas to decide these things on their own, and we're going to stop trying to influence the people in other states according to us, and we're going to demand that they give us the same respect. So that's where we are today. I hope everybody kind of brought a new light to the way you look at Article 3 and the way your congressman is supposed to behave. And I appreciate the chance to come talk to it. There's a card for Get Off My State for everybody. If you don't have one or want some, let me know, and I'll give it to you. We're glad to be here. Thank you.